Ladies and gentlemen, what if the biggest thing you were told about narcissists was never fully true? What if the person they end up with is not someone better, not someone deeper, not someone more special than you, but simply someone who keeps the illusion alive a little longer? Sit with that for a second, because once that truth lands, everything begins to look different. The pain starts to make sense, the confusion starts to clear, and the ending you thought was your defeat starts to look a lot more like your freedom. Most people believe a narcissist moves on because they found the perfect match. That is the lie. The real story is far less romantic and far more revealing. A narcissist is not searching for love the way a healthy person searches for love. They are not looking for peace, truth, depth, or a real bond. They are looking for reflection. They want someone who will mirror back the version of themselves they are desperate to believe in. They want admiration without too many questions. They want affection without accountability. They want loyalty without limits. And the moment that mirror begins to crack, the moment you start seeing what is real, the shift begins. So stay with me, because what comes next matters. It may change how you see your past, your healing, and even the person they chose after you. The truth is not that they won. The truth is that they repeated. And you, whether you know it fully yet or not, became the one person who stepped outside the script and finally saw the stage for what it was. A narcissist does not end up with their soulmate. They end up with whoever protects the mask the longest. That is the center of it. Their relationships are not built on love first. They are built on illusion first. Underneath the charm, the confidence, the polished image, there is usually fear, deep fear, fear of being exposed, fear of being ordinary, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. So they build a false self and spend years defending it. Then they search for a person who will support that false self without realizing it. They are drawn to someone who still believes the performance, someone who sees the shine but not the fracture, someone who feels the intensity and mistakes it for depth. At first, this can look magical. It can feel almost unreal. The attention is strong, the energy is high, the bond seems instant. But the bond is not really built on mutual truth. It is built on emotional projection. They feel good because the fantasy is being fed, and as long as that happens, the connection seems smooth. But then, real life enters. Questions appear, boundaries appear, needs appear, and once that happens, the illusion begins to shake. This is where everything changes. Because the narcissist does not want a relationship that reveals them. They want one that protects them. They do not stay where truth grows. They stay where the mask survives. And when you understand that, you stop asking why they did not choose the strongest person. The answer is simple. The strongest person always sees too much, and once you see too much, you can no longer serve the lie. That is why narcissists do not really repeat relationships. They repeat patterns. It only looks like a new story from the outside. In truth, it is the same script with a different cast. The faces change, the lines change a little, the pictures change, but the emotional structure stays almost exactly the same. First comes the rush, the idealizing, the intense focus, the feeling that you have been seen in a way nobody ever saw you before. Then comes the deeper attachment, when the other person starts trusting, opening, giving more, hoping more. And just when real closeness should begin, the pattern turns. The criticism grows, the confusion grows, the warmth becomes inconsistent, the approval becomes conditional. The same person who once made you feel chosen begins making you feel unstable. This is not random, it is the pattern. They are chasing the high of being admired, not the work of building love. And because they want the same emotional result every time, they recreate the same emotional cycle every time. This is why so many past partners tell stories that sound strangely alike. Different details, same wound. Different setting, same collapse. Keep watching this truth closely because it explains so much. They are not moving from one deep connection to another. They are moving from one fading illusion to the next fresh illusion. They do not want a different ending. They only want to delay the same ending, and that is why nothing truly changes. Unless they face themselves, and most of them spend their lives avoiding that moment, every new beginning is just an old pattern wearing fresh clothes. At the core of this cycle is something even more painful to accept. A narcissist chooses comfort over connection and control over intimacy. That is why loving them feels so heartbreaking. You may have been trying to build something real, something honest, something lasting, but while you were opening your heart, they were protecting an image. Real intimacy asks for honesty. It asks for softness. It asks for the courage to be fully seen, flaws included. For a narcissist, that kind of openness feels dangerous. It threatens the false self they worked so hard to build. It stirs up shame. It stirs up old wounds. It stirs up fears they do not want to name. So instead of moving toward the kind of love that heals, they move toward the kind of dynamic that keeps them safe. Safe does not mean peaceful. Safe does not mean healthy. Safe in their world means controlled. It means they get to shape the story. It means they stay one step above. It means they decide when closeness comes and when distance comes. It means they do not have to answer too deeply for what they do. This is why strong love often scares them more than shallow attention. Strong love sees. Strong love asks. Strong love requires both people to show up as real human beings, and that is exactly what threatens them. So they choose the path that lets them keep power, even if that path leads to emptiness. They choose admiration over vulnerability. They choose predictability over truth. They choose distance over depth. And once you realize that, something inside you starts to shift. You stop blaming yourself for not being enough, because the real issue was never your lack. It was their fear of a love that would require them to be real. This is also why a narcissist does not end up with the awakened person who outgrows them. They cannot. Not for long. The moment you start healing, the dynamic begins to break. Maybe at first it is subtle. You pause before reacting. You question the blame instead of accepting it. You notice the same pattern repeating. You stop trying so hard to earn what should have been given freely. Then the deeper shift comes. You begin setting boundaries. You stop calling chaos love. You stop shrinking to keep the peace. You stop carrying the emotional weight of the whole relationship by yourself. And once that happens, you become dangerous to the illusion. Not dangerous in a harmful way, dangerous in a truthful way. Your clarity exposes what their performance was hiding. Your confidence touches the exact place where their insecurity lives. Your emotional growth shines light into the parts of them they never wanted examined. That is why your healing changes everything. It does not make you less lovable to them because you failed. It makes you unusable to them because you finally see they are not threatened by weakness, they are threatened by awareness. They are threatened by the person who can no longer be pulled back into confusion. And this is important, so do not miss it. When they pull away from someone who is growing, it is not proof that growth was wrong. It is proof that growth worked. You became someone who no longer fit the role they assigned to you. And once you stop playing your part in their script, the performance cannot continue in the same way. That is not your loss. That is your release. Then comes the part many people struggle with the most. The new person is not an upgrade. They are a replacement for a collapsed illusion. That is all. It may not look that way from the outside. The new relationship might seem exciting. It might seem intense. It might seem polished, public, glowing, almost perfect. But looks can be very loud while truth stays very quiet. What you are seeing is not a better love story. You are seeing an earlier chapter of the same story. The opening scene always looks good. That is how the cycle works. The charm returns, the promises return, the affection returns, the image becomes bright again. But the brightness does not mean the structure changed. It only means the script restarted. Narcissists do not usually search for better partners. They search for easier partners. They search for someone who still believes the words, someone who has not yet recognized the emotional tricks, someone who still mistakes intensity for love and speed for destiny. So if they moved on quickly, it was not because the next person had more worth than you. It was because that person was still able to hold the illusion without interrupting it. That is a very different thing. And if you are hurting, hear this clearly. You were not replaced because you lacked value. You were replaced because you stopped carrying a false reality for them. You began seeing what was really there. The new person has not seen it yet. That is why the role is still open to them. But the cycle itself, it has not improved. It has only reset. And that is a hard truth, yes, but it is also a freeing one. Because once you see it, the comparison starts to lose its power. The person a narcissist ends up with is often just someone who does not yet see the truth. That does not make the new person foolish. It makes them early in the pattern, early in the learning, early in the chapter that you already survived. Most people do not walk into this kind of dynamic expecting manipulation. They walk in with hope. They walk in with openness. They walk in wanting love. And that is exactly why the beginning feels so convincing. Narcissists are often very skilled at creating emotional momentum. They know how to make attention feel special. They know how to make fast closeness feel rare. They know how to turn charm into trust before the other person has time to slow down and notice the inconsistencies. So, the person they choose next is usually not someone superior. It is someone emotionally unprepared for the script they are about to enter. Someone who still believes the grand gestures mean depth. Someone who has not yet learned that certain kinds of intensity are not romantic at all. They are strategic. The new partner does not see the control forming under the compliments. They do not see the dependency growing under the constant contact. They do not see how quickly warmth can become pressure once they begin expressing needs of their own. But time reveals what charm hides. It always does. Slowly, the cracks appear. The confusion appears. The exhaustion appears. The same questions begin to rise. Why do I feel blamed so often? Why does love feel like walking on glass? Why do I feel close one moment and rejected the next? This is how the pattern returns, not because the partner failed, but because the truth eventually reaches the surface. And when it does, the illusion begins to die again. What looks like a relationship is often something else entirely. It is a stage built for the ego. From the outside, it may look beautiful. There are photos, posts, romantic words, carefully timed gestures, public moments that suggest devotion. But underneath that polished image, there may be very little true partnership. No equal ground, no shared emotional safety, no deep exchange where both people are allowed to be fully human. What the narcissist often builds is not a bond, but a setting. A place where they can perform, be admired, stay centered, and control the emotional temperature of the room. The other person enters thinking they are stepping into love, but many times they are stepping into a role. They become the supporter, the audience, the validator, the soft place where the narcissist can keep returning for reassurance. And as long as they stay in that role, the performance flows, the energy feels high, the story feels dramatic, the romance feels cinematic. But performance has limits. Eventually, life asks harder questions. Someone gets tired. Someone needs honesty. Someone wants real repair after real pain. Someone asks for consistency instead of chemistry. That is where the set begins to shake. Because the narcissist can create openings, but they struggle to sustain depth. They can create scenes, but not always substance. And when the applause starts to fade, when the partner wants more than a role and begins asking for a real reciprocal connection, the reaction often turns cold. Withdrawal, criticism, punishment, distance. The issue is not that love became impossible. The issue is that performance became harder to maintain. And when they cannot hold the scene, they often go searching for a new audience instead of learning how to build a real home. The healed person steps off that stage. The unhealed person often becomes the next character in the same old story. That is one of the most difficult truths and also one of the most liberating. Healing is not always dramatic at first. It can begin quietly. A strange feeling in your stomach, a moment where the words no longer match the behavior, a memory that suddenly rearranges itself and makes more sense than it did before. Then one day you realize you are no longer reacting the same way. You are no longer racing to fix what you did not break. You are no longer confusing mixed signals with passion. You are no longer begging for the kind of care that should never need to be begged for. That is healing. It changes your role completely. Once you see the manipulation, it becomes harder to romanticize it. Once you see the instability, it becomes harder to call it deep love. Once you see the control, it becomes harder to keep calling it protection. And because of that, you stop being usable inside their script. But while you are stepping out, someone else may be stepping in. Not because they are weaker than you, not because they are more right for the narcissist, but because they are still standing where you once stood, hopeful, open, wanting to believe. They do not yet know the stage is already built. They do not yet know the role has already been written. They may still think the attention means safety. They may still think the intensity means meaning. But awareness changes destiny. It changed yours. And one day, it may change theirs too. That is the deeper truth here. The story feels powerful, but it is not permanent. People wake up, people learn, people leave. The stage only works until someone recognizes it as a stage. And while others slowly awaken, heal, and walk away, the narcissist often stays trapped in the same loop. That is the ending people rarely talk about. When you are hurting, it can seem like they moved on into some bright new life while you were left carrying the grief. It can seem like they found peace while you found pain. But the surface is not the full story. There is usually no true happily ever after in a cycle built on illusion. There is movement, yes. New faces, yes. New excitement, yes. But deep peace, real intimacy, honest companionship, those are much harder to find when a person refuses accountability and keeps running from self-reflection. Instead of evolving, they repeat. Instead of learning, they replace. Instead of sitting with the discomfort that could change them, they escape into another performance. That escape can look powerful from a distance, but look closer. It is often driven by emptiness, by hunger for validation, by fear of being alone with the self they never faced. They gather attention, but not peace. They gather admiration, but not trust. They gather people, but not closeness. And every time the illusion falls apart again, the inner emptiness does not disappear. It deepens. That is why these endings rarely contain real closure. They contain abrupt exits, sudden replacements, unfinished pain, and a rushed move into the next setup. Not because they are progressing, but because they cannot bear stillness long enough to meet the truth. Their ending is not a sweeping love story. It is a pattern that circles back on itself again and again. A loop, a repetition, a road that never really goes forward because the one thing that could change it is the one thing they keep refusing to face. So if you have been watching from a distance, wondering whether they changed for someone else, this is the moment to breathe and see clearly. What they found was not a better reality. It was a fresh delay. What looked like an upgrade was very likely a reset. What looked like a perfect match was probably a person who had not yet seen behind the curtain. And that matters, because it means your story should not be measured against their performance. Your path is different now. You are no longer standing in the same emotional weather. You are learning to trust your own mind again. You are learning that peace feels different from drama. You are learning that healthy love does not require you to disappear. You are learning that being chosen means very little if you are only being chosen for a role. This is where your power quietly returns. Not in proving anything to them. Not in being picked again. Not in waiting for them to finally understand your value. Your power returns when you stop needing their version of the story to define your worth. It returns when you understand that your awakening did not cost you love. It saved you from imitation. And if this message is reaching you at the right moment, let this sink in even deeper. You did not lose to the next person. You graduated from the cycle. You saw the truth. You stepped off the stage. You walked out of the illusion. That is why your future can become something theirs keeps failing to become. Real, grounded, mutual, quietly beautiful. And yes, healing takes time. But unlike the loop they live in, your path actually moves forward. That is the real twist in all of this. The narcissist may keep searching for someone who can hold the fantasy in place, but the person who escapes is the one who actually wins back their life. Not in a loud way, not always in a quick way, but in a true way. The narcissist keeps chasing the same feeling with different faces, hoping the next version of the story will somehow end differently. Yet the problem was never the faces, it was the pattern, it was the mask, it was the refusal to become emotionally honest. You, on the other hand, get to do something much more powerful. You get to become whole. You get to build a life where love is not mixed with fear, where intimacy is not used as leverage, where care is not given and taken away like a test. And maybe that is the part nobody tells you soon enough. The real victory is not that they come back and finally understand what they lost. The real victory is that one day you no longer need that scene at all. One day you wake up and the comparison is gone. The obsession with the new person is gone. The old pain no longer controls the room inside you. And in that silence, in that strength, in that steady return to yourself, you realize something beautiful. They stayed trapped in performance. You stepped into truth. They kept circling the same empty road. You moved ahead. So if you needed a final answer, here it is. A narcissist does not end up with someone better than you. They end up with someone who still believes what you no longer could. And that is not your failure. That is proof that your eyes opened, your spirit woke up, and your life is finally becoming your own.